When I stepped down as executive director of the Wrangell Mountains Center, I did so with a positive farewell and with an optimistic public message about the future of the organization. But the disturbing actions of the Wrangell Mountains Center board since that time have caused me to reverse this prognosis. It has also caused me to rethink in depth the organization's situation. In this video, I would like to provide a bird's eye view of the Wrangell Mountains Center, laying out the timeline of the organization over the past 12 to 15 years to highlight the trends that have plagued the Wrangell Mountains Center. After presenting the timeline, I will turn to my main point, which is hope. The Wrangell Mountains Center does not have to be a sinking ship. It need not be dysfunctional and disorganized, and staff should not experience so much harm and mistreatment. My name is John Erdman. I have about a quarter century of experience in business and accounting, and I am a year-round McCarthy resident. I'm in it to win it out here. Let's start with Jeremy Pataki. Jeremy Pataki was the executive director of the Wrangell Mountains Center during a period that roughly spans the first Obama administration. During this period, the property was more than doubled. The Wrangell Mountains Center property was more than doubled with the acquisition of the Porphyry Place campus from Meg Hunt. In addition to leading the effort to expand the facilities, Jeremy also developed and supported an effective summer staff. In short, his leadership should have ushered in an exciting era of success. But this was an enormous lift for Jeremy, and he suffered the kind of burnout that Wrangell Mountains Center EDs typically face. It is regrettable that the board did not do more to support Jeremy, but failing to support executive directors is the norm for the Wrangell Mountains Center board. And like so many EDs before and after, Jeremy felt his only option was to resign. This was a massive loss for the organization, but even more astonishing was what happened next. The board failed to retain any of the staff that Jeremy had trained up. Losing the entire staff was a spectacular fail, and one that I personally cannot comprehend. Because running a successful organization or business in a remote wilderness environment like McCarthy demands a consistent staff of dedicated professionals in leadership roles. This is essential for organizational health, but also for the safety of staff and program participants in this remote wilderness environment. This series of board fails ushered in a long 8-year period of decline from approximately 2013 to 2020. The organizational degeneration was so severe that, in my opinion, the organization still has not yet fully recovered. The board was unable to rebuild the staff or even to retain the services of an executive director for more than simply a year or two, or in the case of one ED from this period, it was just a matter of months. According to the records that I have studied, the board only staffed one maintenance person for one summer in that long 8-year period, which led to an alarming degeneration in the facilities. These are buildings and structures that were already very vulnerable, worn, and in decline. Now, I want to be clear that good things did continue to happen, and hard work from dedicated individuals, including board members, kept the sinking ship afloat. But it was nonetheless a period of great organizational decline, which brings us to April 1st of 2020, when I was brought in into the organization as the executive director. When I came on, the organization was virtually non-functional. I had only 1 month of overlap. This was during the pandemic when we weren't running programs. 1 month of overlap with prior staff. That was it. Then I was totally and completely on my own, doing my best to work with a dysfunctional and disorganized board that lacked focus and expertise. Nonetheless, of course, as you know, I dove in with enthusiasm and verve to lead the rebuilding effort for every area and every department of the organization. Facilities, finance, administration, rebuilding the staff, of course, communications, donor outreach, and programming. Everything was in a state of atrophy or decline. I made great sacrifices, both personal and professional, over the next 4 years to lead the rebuilding effort. And because of that, and because of the overwhelming response from you, from staff, from volunteers, community members, financial supporters, and yes, board members as well, because of your overwhelming response, together we were able to arrest the decline. And in some areas of the organization, we were actually able to see some reverse of that decline. Part of the reason I am doing these videos is that I know we have an incredible network of supporters who love this organization as much as I do. I've seen your commitment firsthand, and I know that we can succeed as an organization. Using my extensive experience in finance and business management, I was able to formulate a comprehensive plan for success at the Wrangell Mountains Center. All of this was quite the whirlwind, but the hard work and sacrifices paid off, and we were truly at the threshold of a new era. At this critical point, however, very petty but very powerful people within the organization felt threatened, and they made my life insufferable and my leadership untenable. For well over a year, I had to deal with individuals who were actively undermining my leadership and even sabotaging my work. It wasn't a case of misunderstandings or anything like that. It was over a year. The board refused to intervene despite multiple pleas that were both formal and informal. So I felt that, like so many EDs before me, my only choice was to resign. Never before had I been prouder of my work and more motivated and more successful, yet never before have I ever been treated so badly. For me, working with this board was truly a nightmare. For nearly 5 years, this organization had been my all-consuming passion, and I had accumulated an incredible amount of institutional knowledge. I did the deep dive, as so many of you know. I connected the dots for long-term success, including developing financial forecasts and models for long-term fiscal sustainability. And so despite the way that I had been treated, I took the high road and offered to continue to work with the board on a purely advisory basis in a non-decision-making consulting capacity that I thought would be non-threatening, but good for the organization. The board rejected this offer. In my professional opinion, the board is not competent to properly administrate and lead this organization. For me, I have truly never been in a worse run organization or worked with leadership as incompetent and out of touch as the Wrangell Mountains Center board. What is most disturbing to me, and I believe most harmful to the organization, is how they alienate and harm the people who are doing the most to help this organization, most especially the staff. As two former staff and current local McCarthy residents so succinctly put it, we care too much. That's a direct quote, and it's true. The way I would put it is that when staff invest, when they truly care, they get hurt. This is because at root, we are dealing with board leadership who have treated staff as disposable and have done so for decades, for so long that this kind of extreme staff turnover has been institutionalized. It's a part of the culture now. There are plenty of revenue sources that could fuel strategic, mission-focused growth. And there are always a steady stream of talented and mission-driven people looking to work for the Wrangell Mountains Center. Yet if history is of any guide for us, then the board will bungle this opportunity and the Wrangell Mountains Center will enter another period of decline, just as in the post-Pataki era. That's my concern. And that's why I'm advocating for reform and reorganization. That's why I'm calling for the board's old guard to step down and for new board leadership to take a new course for a healthy and vibrant organization, a fresh start. All right, so let's talk reform. Reform number 1, term limits for board members. This is perhaps the most critical reform because term limits would instantly create checks and balances in the leadership structure. I'd like to make an important distinction between staff leadership and board leadership. At the staff level, we need to encourage longevity, both because staff already have accountability built in by way of being directly responsible to the board who hold them accountable for their performance, but also because of the seasonal nature of the organization, which lends itself to staff turnover naturally. So on the one hand, we must encourage longevity in staff and staff retention. But on the other hand, we should impose term limits for board members to avoid that undue sense of entitlement. There's so much more to be said about this first reform, but let's keep moving. Reform number 2, there should be a limit to the total number of board members. 4, maybe 5 at the most. Keep the board lean and productive, not bloated and unresponsive, and packed with people who kind of drift in and out of participation and attentiveness. Reform number 3, defined roles for board members. Board members must be given expectations and standards that they can be held accountable for. Having these defined roles will also encourage board members to stay in their lane and not meddle with staff. The board should be a group of high-level decision makers and not micromanagers. A few obvious high-level responsibilities include financial planning, strategic planning, and vision casting, providing staff leadership with timely annual reviews, passing an annual plan in a timely manner, and maintaining a consistent place-based staff, of course. Reform number 4, defined roles for staff. Defined roles for staff because everyone in the organization needs defined roles and defined expectations so that everyone in the organization can be held accountable. It's not that complicated, is it? These reforms are very simple and common sense. But trust me, their adoption would immediately change the organization, providing checks and balances as well as accountability for all leadership, board and staff alike. This would empower staff, and more than anything, this organization desperately needs an empowered staff. So how would this look practically? First, let's start with the staff. The summer staff would be empowered. They would be well-paid professionals who are returning each summer and training up new staff when they step down or move on. Staff would intimately understand the facilities and programs and operations, and they would use this place-based knowledge to work with committees at the summer's end to provide direction for the next summer. Committees composed of both staff and board members and other volunteers would then draft budgets and recommendations at the end of the summer, which they would formally submit to the board for the big annual meeting in September, wherein the board would use this critical information to pass an annual plan. An annual plan complete with the organization's annual operating budget, budgets for every program and project, along with each departmental budget. The board would then, of course, update the long-term strategic plan to give the organization vision and direction. At that point, in the early fall, the board's most critical job would be finished, and committees would then take the annual plan and the budgets and, together with staff, would refine them and fine-tune these plans for the coming summer. They would do the grunt work. They would apply their expertise. They would have the tools they need, and they would have the time frame they need for proper planning for every summer. Here's the idea. The Wrangell Mountains Center becomes an organization led by a place-based staff and dedicated committee members who are able to focus and maximize their expertise because the board has their eye on the long game, ensuring that the resources are there to provide everything that the organization needs to function at a high level consistently year after year, after decade. The board becomes a group of qualified decision makers who can focus on high-level matters of governance, working with a small, efficient cadre of serious, like-minded individuals who make solid decisions in a proactive and timely manner. This kind of focus would truly be a Copernican shift type of a moment for this organization. But it would stabilize the Wrangell Mountains Center so that capital campaigns can begin in earnest. And they need to begin in earnest to rebuild the crumbling infrastructure and create a thriving, place-based educational facility that will outlast us all and endure for future generations. These are critical times in our world. Human beings are increasingly being funneled into artificial and now virtual environments. Increasingly, we are cut off from the wild world that birthed us. We need the Wrangell Mountains Center to thrive because we as a human family need institutions that connect people to wild spaces and educate them on the value of that connection. The Wrangell Mountains Center needs a fresh start. The organization needs both reform as well as new board leadership. I have presented my perspective. It is but one point of many, of course. But if you do resonate with the idea of a fresh start, if you resonate with any of the reforms that I have presented, I would encourage you to reach out and share your thoughts and experiences with me, or just send them to the board directly. Your input, your perspective is important. Let's keep this conversation going. This is John Erdman signing off from McCarthy. Stay wild, friends.